Wednesday, July 13th, 2016. Welcome back, everybody. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Okay, Mr. Moderator. Representative Adams.
Here.
Bailey.
Here.
Baker.
Here.
Burrell. Bauer. Burgos.
Here.
Casper.
Here.
Sini. Connolly.
Here.
Dean Shinbrot.
Here.
Evans.
Here.
Frickman.
Here.
Garcia.
Here.
Gilly.
Here.
Crockett Hubbard.
Here.
Langino. Laughlin.
Here.
Marley. Massett.
Here.
McCabe.
Here.
McDermott.
Here.
Merritt.
Here.
Nault.
Here.
Nugent.
Here.
Aubry.
Here.
Parker. Pasqualini. Quinn. Slaker Harsant.
Here.
Steinford.
Here.
Streeter. Irma. Streeter. James. Swindell. Wagner. Watrous.
Here.
Wells.
Here.
Williams. Wilson.
Here.
And Newsom. 26 present.
Thank you.
26 members are present. I declare quorum. Will please rise for a moment of silence and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Representative Massett.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We have quite a contingent here this evening to give a report on the 2020 vision. And in the interest of time, in order to allow them to make their presentation and to allow members of this body to ask questions, even though the Rules and Procedures Committee met this evening, I would request that we be allowed to put that committee report off until our September meeting, if that's okay.
But you'll still have to provide the meeting minutes to the town clerk,
I
right?
have the minutes, and I've already spoken to the clerk, and I told the clerk that I would email them to her either Thursday or Friday of this week.
And we can hold off on the report so that we have sufficient time to go through it. Thank you very much, Representative Massett. Approval of the meeting minutes of the June 8th meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Wilson and Garcia.
Motion's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes for the June 8th RTM meeting. Is there any discussion? Representative Nault.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. There was a minor, omission from my remarks that I made at the end of the last meeting. I talked about the Charter Revision Commission and the fact that there were a bunch of people that showed up there and spoke about budget reductions, things like that. So I'd like to have those remarks added back into the meeting minutes if possible. I've already provided an input to the town clerk.
Okay. Any further discussion on the June 8th meeting minutes? Seeing none, we'll vote on the meeting minutes as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
One abstention, Lori Watrous. That's 20. Oh, I didn't see Casper.
Can you please
Casper. Yeah.
The abstentions, please raise your hand one more time.
24.
Double check.
24. 0. 2.
That motion passes 23-0-3. Next order of business, citizens petitions. This is the portion of the RTM agenda where the RTM welcomes comments from citizens. Each presentation should be limited, 10 minutes or less, and citizens should, if possible, submit written comments. Presentation should be limited to matters pertinent to Groton. The moderator or members, through the moderator, shall ask questions only in order to clarify the speaker's presentation. Responses may be given by the moderator and/or by the town manager. Citizens should make their presentation from the lectern and state their name and address for the record. Roseanne Katowski.
Good evening. Roseanne Katowski, 24 Ann Avenue, Mystic, Connecticut. First of all, I would like to thank the RTM members who supported the taxpayers during the recent budget deliberations. I, along with many, many others, appreciate that the RTM reduced the 6% tax increase handed to you by the Town Council to 3.7%. Still way too high, but I appreciate your efforts, especially after the very large 4.1% tax increase for 2016. That is 7.8% in tax increases in just 2 years. This is not fiscally responsible or sustainable, and structural changes must be made in Groton to avoid this in the future. For those RTM members who did not protect the taxpayers and supported the status quo spending, I would like to read something. I will be substituting state with Groton. This is difficult for Groton and for all of our employees, but it's one that nevertheless must occur as we adapt to our new economic reality. Groton cannot provide all the services it has always delivered. We must align spending with revenue. We must ensure government provides its core services while living within its means. We must budget based not on what we wish we had, but on the dollars we actually have available to spend. We must step up and lead by making difficult decisions now to improve our outlook down the road. This quote is from Governor Daniel Malloy, arguably the most liberal governor the state of Connecticut has ever had. Another quote from the New London Day editorial regarding the state budget. Again, this is from a liberal newspaper. Spending plans built on the platform of earlier budgets tend to make assumptions that keep the status quo, and when the money runs short, decisions must be made on the basis of what there is to spend, not which programs deserve to be funded. My point is, for the RTM members who did not support the taxpayers during the 2017 budget deliberations, even the most liberal-minded are acknowledging that there is, in fact, a new economic reality regarding how the taxpayers' hard-earned dollars are spent. After reading the minutes from the RTM budget meeting, I realized what a challenge the RTM has with some members accepting the new economic reality. This is absolutely true for members of the Town Council as well. Unfortunately, this is continuing even after the budget has been deliberated. Recently, the Town Council voted to approve a 2% raise for non-union employees for 2016. So retroactive to July 1st, 2015, the non-union employees will be receiving a 2% raise. Remember, in 2016, the taxpayers were hit with a very large 4.1% tax increase. There are 39 non-union salary employees with an average salary of $82,910. The median household income in Groton is reported in CERC as $61,966. Remember, that's households, not individuals. I have reviewed the minutes from the April 27, 2015 RTM Finance Committee meeting, as well as the April 29, 2015 RTM budget meeting, and there is no discussion regarding giving non-union employees 2% raises for 2016. So now, after the fact, after all the budget deliberations for 2 fiscal years, 2016 and 2017 with no mention or debate during the budget process regarding 2% raises for non-union employees for either year, there is contingency money available for non-union raises in a year that the taxpayers were hit with a very large 4.1% tax increase. This is not transparent. I want to add that I am not anti-non-union employee. Nothing could be further from the truth. I believe that if the town can start to control itself and produce budgets with 2% or less tax increases, then non-union raises should be considered. Another point I would like to make is coming from the perspective that a 4.1% tax increase indicates that the non-union employees are not managing the town effectively or efficiently. Why would they be awarded any raise at all, especially in a year with such a large tax increase? The question must be asked, why were the 2% non-union raises not debated with all the other line items with the 2016 budget? Also, for the 2017 budget, we have another large tax increase of 3.7%, and still, no budget deliberations regarding non-union raises. Will the 2017 non-union raises be awarded retroactively by the Town Council after the 2018 budget is completed? One final question. Since the RTM must approve all transfers over $10,000, will the RTM have the opportunity to debate and vote on transferring money out of contingency for the 2016 non-union raises? I have documentation to support my claims. If you want it, Betsy will have it. Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would wish to speak? Representative Massey.
Mr. Moderator, this is for the town manager. Mark, if I'm not mistaken, when we were doing the budget, in some of the accounts, you explained that it was higher because you were anticipating perhaps a 2% raise, and there were also labor contracts coming up for negotiation, and you wanted to have that money available in case we needed it.
Both for the FYE 16 budget, which is behind us now, and for the 17 budget. If you read the budget message when we get to personnel costs, it's explained what contracts are in place and which contracts are not. And for the coming year, most of the contracts are not in place. And a year ago, year plus, most of the contracts were not in place for 2016. And that's why the contingency amount was increased, proposed to be increased from the typical 350, which is what it's been at for the last couple of years, to 550. Not that the 200,000 delta would pay for all the increases. But with respect to the non-union, it is up to the council to determine union and non-union increases. There are no transfers to pay for these increases. Either the departments have funding available at the end of the year to pay for the increases, or we'll have to take them out of the coming year because we spent all of the contingency money for FYE 16, the $550,000 was zeroed out. That was spent a number of months ago. So I think it was very transparent in the budget message. I think the point you're raising, Jackie, is in the estimate columns. And it was very difficult to explain this to folks because it is complicated, is because we had so many employees, we had so many contracts that were not in place when we put together the 2016 budget, but some of them did get settled during the year, that the estimate numbers reflected that higher number. And that's why I was concerned when some RTM members were attempting to compare the request for next year to the estimate. or to last year's, because it's kind of somewhat of a moving target. All of the dollars that came out of contingency to pay for union increases, the RTM approved. There are no dollars to approve to transfer out of contingency for the non-union, because there's no money left in contingency. So the dollars that were used or are being used to pay for those increases would have to come out of the individual's department in which they work in, which is not a transfer. That's why the RTM will not see those transfers, because it's not a transfer. It's coming out, if there are folks in Public Works either had the money left over at the end of the year or did not. But if they did, that's not a transfer. It's still coming out of the same function.
Are there any other questions for the manager on this subject? Mayor Flax?
So just to clarify, because, well, for credibility's sake, 7.8% over the last 2 years. 3 years ago is a 1.9% decrease, I believe. That makes it 5.9% over 3 years, or less than a 2% average. That's all.
Are there any other questions for the manager on this subject? Hearing none, we'll move on. Reception of communications. Representatives Pascalini, Wagner, Williams, and Streeter Irma notified me that they would not be here tonight. Also, I want to announce that Representative D'Amato resigned from the RTM, so we have a new opening in District 6. Representative Conley?
I apologize for not passing on previously, but Representative Marley did notify me that he would not be attending today, and I believe I was supposed to notify yourself, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. So as you know, we have members of the Board of Ed and School Facilities Task Force here to talk to us about the referendum that we're going to be voting, that we're going to be voting on next month. But before we get to that, I'm going to refer this to committee. This is from the Town Council. This is a referral 2016-0169. Adoption of ordinance appropriating $184,500,000 for the design and construction of the Groton 2020 plan, consisting of a new consolidated middle school and conversion of the existing middle schools into renovated like new elementary schools, and authorizing the issue of bonds and notes in the same amount to finance said appropriation. Because in my opinion, this is a very important subject, I'm not going to refer it solely to the Education Committee. I'm also going to refer it to the Finance Committee, because financing of this project is extremely important. So both committees will have to meet in time for our meeting next month and provide their recommendations. Report of the Town Manager.
Thank you. I'll try to keep this short so we can get on to the Education Initiatives Committee report. Hopefully all of you have picked up the newsletter off to the side, financial statement. July is a tough period of time to get a handle on financials, because we're trying to close out 1 year and set up another year. So all these numbers are preliminary. Fund balance as of June 30th, unaudited, is approximately $8.3 million, which is 7% of the FYE 2017 general fund adopted budget. Contingency for 2016 was budgeted at $550. As I previously noted, all of those funds had been transferred out during the course of the year, and the review of those transfers are noted in your newsletter. And capital reserve fund balance as of June 30th was approximately $710,000, up slightly, primarily due to interest income. A couple things I just want to point out to you. The mini sub fleet has gone to sea and has been dispersed throughout southeastern Connecticut. Hopefully you've seen some of them as you're out and about. This was an initiative as part of the 100th anniversary of the sub-base, the sub-century anniversary. The town of Groton did participate, along with a number of other communities and businesses. There are 21 submarines that have been dispersed throughout southeastern Connecticut, and I think there were 20 sponsors of those submarines. The town of Groton mini sub is right in front of the Groton Public Library. If those of you who go to the library, you may notice off to the side, off to the left as you walk into the building, a round planter. We reconfigured that a little bit, and you have a picture of it in your newsletter. There is a website, so if you want to go visit all of them during the course of the summer, I would encourage you to do that. The artists did a wonderful job with tremendous support from Grasso Tech in this project. We've also attached, so you can see an attachment that shows what all the various submarines look like, who the various sponsors were, what businesses and other organizations. You may want to take a look at that. We were recently also notified that we are in receipt of an $800,000 grant that we submitted on behalf of the Groton Town Housing Authority. Those funds will be used to continue exterior and interior work at Pequot Village. There's been a lot of deferred maintenance, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to attract additional funding over the years ahead. Also is attachment 2 is the latest economic development update that has been put together by OPDS. I think we've noted this before, but through the summer, held on Tuesdays over at Washington Park in the city, is a new farmers market, which appears to be hugely successful, and lots of vendors. I would encourage you, if you have time, to get over there. It's on Tuesday from 3 to 6 p.m. This Saturday, the Senior Center will be sponsoring a program entitled What It's Worth. It's basically somewhat a takeoff on the Antiques Roadshow. There will be appraisers here. You can bring your goods in, and for $5 a piece, they will be appraised. That's running from 9 to 12 p.m. And I will stop there.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the town manager? Seeing none, we'll move on to report of the superintendent of schools. At the Facilities Task Force would like to take it away.
Good evening, everyone. I am Susan Austin, the Assistant Superintendent. Our Superintendent, Dr.
Yeah, we need to get you a mic.
Yes.
We can't quite hear you.
Good evening. I'm Susan Austin, the Assistant Superintendent of Schools. Our own superintendent, Dr. Grenier, is on a much-deserved family vacation, but we do have a team here, and it's actually the Groton Task Force that has been working on the facilities project, not just the schools. It really is a community outreach and research project that's been going on, so I'm going to turn it over to a couple people to get it started. So, John?
Thanks, Susan. Appreciate that. So, thanks, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everyone. I'm John Heller, the chairperson of this Groton School Facilities Initiative Task Force, which Mayor Summers put into place 3.5 years ago. And as we've come back here several times over the years, probably about 4 times, as we've worked for Mayor Summers, then Mayor Schmidt, and now Mayor Flax. We're pleased, as we've been here just a couple of months ago, to tell you that our work is completed. And as you know, the Board of Ed and the Town Council have approved it to go to you to decide whether or not to send this plan forward to go to referendum to the voters on November 8th of this year. So our plan tonight was just to give you a little reminder about what we've briefed you on and address any questions that you may have as you take this next month to weigh whether or not to, you're going to vote August 10th, I believe, whether or not to send this forward to referendum. So we just have about 20 slides here to just sort of give you one more time that overview. and address any questions that you may have. So please ask those questions along the way. But the outline of what we're doing today is we're just going to give you some of the objectives of what our task force was chartered with doing. We'll talk about the current state quickly of our facilities. We'll give you the guts of the plan as we were trying to provide equity and increase effectiveness and be efficient. Then we'll give you a little bit of a timeline of the construction, and then we'll talk to you about the schools themselves, and we'll get into the money after that, and then finally the timeline for how this is getting towards November 8th. But again, along the way, address any questions. Just know that I may say we're going to get to that one a little bit later. So one more time, we're here to try and address the issue of our aging school infrastructure. On the previous slide, you would have seen that where we were several years ago was we were at 1 high school and 3 middle schools and 10 elementaries. That's down on the bottom. That's where we were 16 years ago. Right now, we're at 1 high school, 2 middles, and those 7 elementary schools, and we were chartered right in between those. As I mentioned, we were chartered in 2012, August of 2012, to address the failed referendum which was going to build a single middle school, and the town council, Mayor Summers, wanted us to figure out what are we going to do with those 3 middle schools. Well, right away, the Board of Ed closed one of those, closed Fitch Middle School, and gave us to that middle block where we are now. But we were still charged with dealing with that issue of those middle schools and our aging infrastructure of 3 of our elementary schools, those being Butler, Claude Chester, and Pleasant Valley. So that was what we spent 3.5 years going around and around and trying to noodle through. And as I've told you before, we really did our due diligence on figuring out any kind of configuration, any kind of plan. 1 middle, 2 middles, no middles. I mean, we really went up and down and round and about for all those years trying to gain consensus around a visioning committee, which we pulled in 2015, I think, to get a broader perspective from the community. So you know, you probably, any ideas or concerns that you have, we've probably thought about those and have a good answer for you about our thought process in order to inform your thought process going forward. So next slide, please. Our objectives here with this whole project was, one, to develop that long-term project to modernize those outdated facilities. As you can see there, they're on an average over 60 years old, and enhance the educational opportunities for all of our students, providing equity across our entire district via magnet school programming, which will allow our students across the district to go to the other schools to get balanced. And it addresses those state mandates and eliminates the need for that racial balanced redistricting. As you all know, we've gone through a long period where the Board of Ed, much to their chagrin, has had to meet those state mandates by redistricting. We've just moved those lines according to the demographics. Our town is tired of it. We have kept in balance. We have been good Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts to the state of Connecticut by meeting their mandates on the backs of our residents by redistricting. This plan with building a single middle and this intra-district magnet program will eliminate the need to continue putting that burden on our families. So you see there in the dark blue, we did a survey, a statistically significant survey out there to over 400 residents, and of all kinds of demographic spins to make sure we are adequately representing the district. And you'll see there throughout about what some of those findings were, that 3/4 of our people say they're in general supporting of modernizing our facilities, and more than that agree that pre-K education is important, which, as you may remember, was a big issue in the last referendum. Over half agree that this in-town magnet school should be included, and just about half are more likely to support the passage if it'll eliminate that awful redistricting which we've had to suffer through. Thanks. So we decided to consolidate a consolidated middle school to be built on the Merritt property. And again, we've gone through all sorts of site options and came back down onto the Merritt property. And so this is our plan. We would consolidate one middle school in the Merritt, convert Cutler and Westside, renovate them like new into elementaries, and get a diversity grant status for one of those schools which would come out on October 1st. And we would need from the state a waiver for that, for the requirement that says in order to renovate like new, you can only spend $450 per square foot to get that renovate like new status. We will need a waiver because our costs are going to be higher than that. Our buildings need more work than that. But that's our plan, is to renovate those two middle schools like new. Mike?
Yeah, John, just to clarify and add to that, even though we'll have a good feel on October 1st, that's the date and time where all enrollment data for the state is, for each individual school system is set in the state. So Groton Public Schools will have to submit a report up to the state saying, we have X number of students in the district, X number of students in each school. Here's the composition as well as the other attributes of those students. We'll have a good understanding of where that diversity status stands on that date. However, that number will not be finalized by the state until the spring of 2017. On that same date every year is when they finalize the report. It takes them a number of months to dig through all of the student data throughout all of the districts in the state. And to further clarify the requirement for a waiver, the reason we would be needing a space waiver for this type of project, anytime you take a building that is designed for larger students, such as a middle school, and convert it into an elementary school, you have some core areas that don't fit the state standard formula for how they calculate space needs. A middle school will have a larger gymnasium than an elementary school, a larger cafeteria space, some other larger cores that all go into that calculation. So the space waiver will be driven by the fact that we're reusing an existing building. Go ahead.
As you may remember,
we have a question?
Oh, sorry. While we're passing the microphone to Representative Conley, I'll just remind us that Mike Zubo is our consultant from Malone and McBride. He's been, holding our hand through this whole process for the last 3.5 years very selflessly.
On the diversity grant and the explanation that you were just given, am I correct in that if we are not out of racial balance in either October 2016 or when it's finalized, that we do not get the 80% for the one building?
Yeah, you would have to go through special legislation to get 80% for the one building. Basically, if you do meet that 25% diversity status, there is a legislation out there that automatically grants that waiver.
So that's something we wouldn't know until, for sure, spring 2017.
You would have an idea on October 1st. The numbers aren't going to change, but it would not be official in the state's eyes or the application until spring of 2017. It's just the process.
Okay.
Whether you're doing construction or you're just one of the schools that they're going through the review on racial balance.
Which is a good point. And remember, the town council can at any point decide to pull the plug on the project. If we're not getting the kind of reimbursement that we wanted, or the project costs are gonna, the state grants aren't gonna work, we can always say no later. Good. Next one. So this is the status of our current facilities. As I mentioned earlier, they're over 60 years old. They have well lived beyond and served our community beyond their service life, not only from a facility standpoint, but the way we are educating our children today is vastly different than we were when they were put into place in the 50s. These buildings have been maintained through continuous maintenance with little to no reinvestment or modernization, but they have been cared for lovingly by our school facilities workforce for all those decades. Those portables that you see there and you'll see around our community, were called temporary buildings, and they've temporarily been there for over 40 years. And as you can see, they certainly pose security risks. Our survey finding, you can see the reinforcement on that. That's the status of our those three elementaries. On the middle school level, they're a combined 114 years, so they're about the same age. And they've again remained functional with good maintenance and modest investment. They have 6 portables now because we had to close Fitch Middle and create that capacity. We're requiring significant investment there to maintain those functionalities, again, without that modernization. So this is our status quo of our deferred costs. This is a $2012 estimate about what the deferred maintenance is at those 5 facilities, Claude, Chester, Pleasant Valley, Butler, Cutler, and Westside. $55 million. So my point on this is a no vote doesn't mean zero costs. A no vote means at some point we have to address that $55 million backlog, which we've just been tabling and tabling and tabling and tabling. But at some point, we're going to have to put a new roof on at a dollar, at $1 to every dollar, you know, at dollar for every Groton dollar, it's going to cost us $1. So, so at some point we have to address that $55 million backlog. That is a real cost. Again, those are conservative dollars. That number is probably a lot higher. But my point one more time is that the cost of doing nothing is not zero. It is $55 million for us to and that just gets them up to code. That does not modernize the classroom to how we're educating our young people in today. As it says there, it assumes no expansion, no modernization. It just keeps the buildings going, and that would cost us $150 per average median taxpayer, homeowner. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and before I pass off to Ms. Austin, I just want to point out, John mentioned a great point on modernization. The date of the vintage of the buildings, they don't allow to have proper technology in the classrooms. They're currently not conditioned spaces, air quality of definite concern. The spaces aren't configured for modern day learning, even 20th century, let alone 21st century learning. So a lot of that has an impact on the educational environment and the programs that the Board of Ed as well as Groton Public Schools wants to deliver in those spaces. So I'll pass it off to Ms. Austin just to walk us through some of the expanded opportunities.
So I think the real vision of 2020 is to really expand opportunities for all of our students, and with one middle school, we're going to equalize opportunities. This Board of Education is very concerned that children throughout our community have equal access and equal opportunity to education. On the forefront to that is access to more advanced coursework, to have rigor and relevance, especially in middle schools. I understand that as well as anybody, as a middle school math teacher myself. So it's really important. We're looking at the middle years program, and through grants that we've received through DODEA, Department of Defense, and looking to Learn, the Learn organization for other grants so that we can get the kind of professional development for all of our teachers in what we call the middle years program, which would then give better access to the International Baccalaureate. We're one of the few high schools, our flagship Fitch, you know, having an International Baccalaureate program, and being a Navy junior myself who traveled from port to port, I understand the significance of IB, and so do our families and our military families. So this will be equal access and really growing this program for all kids, which is so exciting. It's like the best professional development you can give to a teacher. The interscholastic and intramural sports would also be in line with one another. Athletic fields and expanded resources we've taken into consideration on that campus of a middle school, high school, and I've seen other campuses in other districts that I've served, and how well you can combine resources for efficiencies and for giving kids educational opportunities. In addition to that, we are always looking at those extracurriculars and those enrichment programs after school. And if one school on the west side or the Mystic side has a teacher interested in math counts, then those kids may get a math counts opportunity. Well, this, when you're housing everybody together, all kids will have an opportunity for math counts, and being the middle school teacher, that's a really great thing to do. That and robotics and a whole lot of other things are just as wonderful as the sports for kids in the middle school years. And then expanding the idea of elementary intra-district. Because of the state law, we cannot have students come into our district. We can't have kids from New London come into Fitch, even though they might want to participate in the International Baccalaureate, because there's been a freeze on that. So we can only go within our schools. And so there's a lot of competition. We're paying $2.5 million to $3 million for our children to go outside of Groton to participate in the magnet program, and we know that our parents and our students want to have more choice. That was obvious in the survey and other surveys that the board has given out to families. So we already have our Catherine Kolnowski as a STEAM magnet school. This year, Northeast Academy will become a performing arts magnet school. The turnout in the lottery was just amazing. We had like 75 families who wanted to go to either one side or the other side of town, and throughout all of Groton. So that's very exciting. And so this would just expand that opportunity, having 2 more elementary schools that would be intra-district magnets. So the technology and space designed around these programs too, that you could really build a building that would house some specialized education.
I think all we really wanted to highlight on this slide is this just shows you where our racial balance looks like.
Yeah, and also I think, as John said it best, we're looking at buildings that were built in the 1950s, 1960s, and where students were predominantly, where the core of your elementary school and middle school population were at that time. And development happens, subdivisions occur, people move, population shift. And looking at today's landscape of where the students are, the buildings really aren't in the right spot to be able to best utilize those. And we'll touch on it a little later on, especially with the state of funding in Connecticut, ECS funding. The old model of the 1950s and 60s of having these 2 classroom per grade schools, so 2 sections per grade, these smaller educational learning environments, were never really tremendously efficient type of systems. And to be able to strive for efficient systems, budget savings, being resilient to changes in state funding that's passed down to either the municipal level or the educational level, you really need to begin looking at where your buildings are, what size are they, and how are they going to fit today's population and the future population. So what we wanted to point out here is exactly what the landscape of the schools relative to the students and this state mandate for racial balance would look like. Before I pass it off to John, I would ask Ms. Austin sort of on the spot to share a story that she had with meeting with the Commissioner of Education and talking about Groton's racial balance plan.
We were fortunate to have Dr. Diana Wenzel, who is the Commissioner of Education here in Groton. She attended a volunteer breakfast, and we had the pleasure of, with the Navy's support, really taking her to our different sites and visiting our Blue Ribbon School, which has officially been named Blue Ribbon, is, our Dr. Charles Barnum School. And we were able to drive by West Side. We were able to go through Navy housing, and I was able to explain the dilemma that we are in. While we support our military, it does put a financial hardship on this town. So, and then we were able to go to the sub base, and she basically said to me that, in talking to her about this plan and the vision for Groton's future with the facilities, she said, well, that is the proposed plan that's been given to the state of Connecticut, and that's the expectation that that will be followed through. And so she was wishing us the best of luck with all of that, and really was behind us all the way in looking for a resolve of the situation for equity and balance in this district. So I thought that was quite telling. But she's very supportive of this town and really seemed to understand even better after our field trip around town. So that was good.
And before we move on to the next slide, what I want to point out too is about the intra-district magnet programs at the elementary school. What's very important to understand, these are schools that are going to have a neighborhood component. So, for example, where we're looking at reusing West Side as an elementary school, within 1 mile of that school, which the boundaries, the parameters for walking for Groton elementary schools is about 1 mile if there's a safe route to school. There's 500 students within 1 mile, 500 elementary students within 1 mile, not counting the overlap with Kolnaski. There is a critical mass there. So these schools would have a neighborhood component as well as a magnet component. And that magnet component, in order to be able to provide equal educational opportunities for anybody in the district to attend there, because let's not forget that these elementary schools are going to be theme magnets. There's going to be a draw. The planning around it has been to allot seats for each neighborhood for the opportunity to be able to attend that school. Well, what that does is that allows the school to be open for everybody, to be in the nature of the state's diversity school, in that it has to be a school that's open to the district. So it provides equal opportunity for anybody to partake in that program, as well as be able to provide a sort of a mechanism to be able to ensure that racial balance is maintained through this choice system without having to go through the disruption of redistricting over and over again. So what we've looked at was we've run some different numbers and looked at exactly where they would fall from the various parameters, and our projections show that Groton will be able to keep and maintain that balance for the foreseeable future as long as the school is sized at about 600 students with a significant magnet component for both of them. And with the planning for the magnet component at Northeast Academy, it's just adding to that robust system when you begin to add in Catherine Kolnaski, the offering that's there now. So really moving in the right direction to be able to have this more open choice system.
So this just gives you that in the big picture. You can see the little legend there that the big red star is on the Merritt property where we're proposing the new middle school. The schools to close are the black stars, and that'll be Pleasant Valley, Claude Chester in the middle, and Butler to your right. And the new elementaries are the yellow stars on the existing sites of Westside and Cutler to your right. And then you can see the red dots of our existing elementaries around the district. But that's the future landscape. And this is our timeline, our proposed timeline. So if we were to have a referendum pass, we would start building that new middle school in January 2017. And we would continue that for the next 3 years, and then we would start the construction of once we were able to. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, you would begin design early in the 2017 year to be able to basically get a little bit ahead to save on some escalation. It would take about a 24-month construction time frame. These projects would run in succession. The only thing that would be concurrent would be the construction at the middle school and the design at the elementary school. This allows for the construction to be done on unoccupied sites, so the middle school students would be able to be offloaded into the completed middle school, which would open in the 2021 school year. Once the students were out of those two buildings, construction would be able to move pretty quickly in about an 18-month time frame once design is done to be able to have maybe a mid-year move in 21, 22, or delay it a little bit depending on weather conditions and other factors that are beyond our control at this point in time, and opening in 2022, 23. What that does is it pushes it out a little bit, but it also allows you to have a construction site where you don't have small children running around on it, and that's very important for the West Side site, as that is kind of a tight site. There is some concerns there, so having it unoccupied would really facilitate the construction of that. What we have here is our test fit. This isn't the conceptual design. This isn't a schematic design. This isn't how it's going to look. It may look like this, but it'll have to go through a complete design process. What we wanted to do here was just illustrate that the program fits, the building program as well as the athletic program and the outdoor PE program fit on the Merritt site. Access can be had on the site. We can get sufficient parking. We can get safe egress for buses. We aren't impacting the neighboring Fitch High School nor the major traffic patterns. That this is a viable site for the new consolidated middle school. So everything works on that site. Our test fits for the Cutler School concepts, looking at saying, well, we're going to need a small addition as part of this to be able to support a 600 student middle school and remove the existing portables, or 600 student elementary school and remove the existing portables. We're showing a small addition off of the southern part of the site, about 10,700 square feet. We drew some arrows around it because we know and we've heard over the course of the process just how important the athletic fields are. We wanted to make sure that we weren't shortening the porch too much on the baseball field. So we're able to respect that, as well as adding the necessary early childhood paved play and elementary school playground that you would not find on a middle school site but would be required on an elementary school. There would be additional parking improvements on the north side of the site near the wetland area right now. There is kind of a gravel area there that is the informal turnaround. It's not really a very safe or efficient turnaround, so we would be making improvements to that as part of the overall site circulation, and of course meeting modern standards of keeping bus and parent drop-off completely separated. We've had a couple unfortunate accidents across the state, so that's something we want to be very cognizant of, to be able to have that completely separate to ensure that it was going to be safe, and this site allows that to be able to be accomplished. Looking at the same conversion for West Side, we were looking at a small addition of about 11,000 square feet as well off the back of the building. We would be looking at adding 360 access in order to meet all of the fire code, ensure that public safety, that you can get any emergency apparatus around there as needed. Being able to reconfigure the site to be able to separate that bus and parent drop off, and adding the elementary play as well as the early childhood play and a nice paved play area there without touching the ball field on the lower plateau of the site. Overall, looking at our construction estimates that were last updated in May, these are predicated on the latest reimbursement rates by the state as well as some other assumptions that we have built into here. We're looking at about $184.4 million project with about $84 million of that to the town. One of those assumptions we've been talking about already. That assumption is landing the diversity school status. What that does is that significantly lowers, and we have it applied right now to the Cutler, which is the bottom line item, lowers your net cost to Groton from what would be around $22 million down to about $11.8 or so million. And that's predicated on having a certain diversity within the Gloucester school.
So this gets you to the overall cost breakdown. You're looking at the same numbers, but in a graphical standpoint there from your middle school, the red being the net reimbursable cost, the blue being the cost to Groton for each of those three buildings. So you can see the two elementaries look different because of that diversity grant. On the west side, where the town would be responsible for $22.5 million, whereas on the Cutler site, pending the diversity grant, we'd only be responsible for $11.8 million. But you could see as Mike just said, 184 top number. The Groton proposed share is $84 million. We're looking for $100 million state share. So call that $100,220,000. And this will, on the next slide, also generate out some operational efficiencies, like the reducing the number of buildings from 10 schools to 8 will help us address some of those economic conditions. Of course, our maintenance costs will go down. The administrative staff will go down. But Dr. Grenier has gone on record saying he's not going to lay off any teachers to make this work, but there would be a potential cost avoidance of about $1.5 million. And again, that some of that instructional staff savings would happen through natural attrition. As we talked about earlier, Mike mentioned the neighborhood school model back when we had 10 neighborhood elementaries, which was great, but you had 2 sections in every grade. You can do this math just like I can. If you have 45 kids in a particular grade and you're trying to divide those into 2 classrooms, you're either doing 22, 23 kids in a classroom, which is a lot, or you're doing 15, which is too few. Your school just doesn't have that much flexibility when you only have that number spread across. You consolidate, you make it a little bit less number of elementaries, and you can gain some efficiency opportunities. Susan?
And I can speak from experience. I've been in 4 different districts. This is my 4th district, and I have to tell you that as an elementary principal for a decade, I ran a school of 600 students. And for me, it was wonderful in the idea of enrollment because I could have typically 22 to 24 students in every classroom. I could break them apart and group them in multiple ways. It was awesome for, really efficiencies. We had 3 schools like that. There was one district where we had to close a school, and because of cost savings and because of reduced enrollment, and it saved the district an incredible amount of money. So even closing one school can be a cost savings. This is a very modest number when you think about the staffing and the facilities, and and then you're really getting 2 new elementary schools. And one of the parts of my job is really, as an assistant superintendent, is really monitoring enrollment all the time. And there have been cases where we did have large numbers in certain grade levels at certain schools, especially if they only have 2 teachers, that we've had to ask families even to go to a different school in some cases and request that they start up in a different school, especially with the 3 Navy schools, because that's a moving target in Groton. Those numbers can change month to month. From September, you have a very different talent pool of students than you do in the spring. So we're monitoring that constantly, and this would really help us a lot to really consolidate these schools. And this is a modest number, I would say.
So on the next slide, you'll see the cost, and from that survey, that phone survey that I talked about earlier, this is the level of support that we got out of the public survey in the summer of 15. We asked them at different price points how likely they were to support this. And so we're right in between that first and second bar graph there, with the net cost to Groton being $84 million. We're right smack in the middle of that. So you can see that we're already, without a campaign, without educating them any more than this survey, we're already at 53% support. Of course, we'd get more support if the state paid more, but that's where we are right now. So we think it's certainly feasible to get a passed referendum. The next steps, the dates, you all will decide whether or not to send this to the voters in your August 10th meeting. We will complete our grant application to the. It's done. That was due on the 30th of June. It's already. Oh yeah, it was done on the 30th, and then the referendum's coming up on November 8th. Sorry, November. That says 15th. It's not the 15th. I believe it's the 8th. So that is again a summary of the same proposal that we've come down here several times over the years, but just to refresh your memory, and any questions that you all have, we'd be glad to address them. Mr. Moderator, do you want to?
Could you please bring up the lights? Can I trouble somebody to do that? Representative Nugent?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have a question, Mr. Hell. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Earlier, your earlier slide, when you talked about the $55 million for, which is just for repairs.
Yes, ma'am.
If $55 million was bonded, would there be any state reimbursements or any state grants?
Not much. Mike?
Yeah, you would have to go through a schematic design process and determine what's eligible and what's ineligible. Would it be a broad brush, say 57%, what you would get on a renovate? No, it would not. It would be a certain percentage of that, and we had estimated it may be around 20–25% of that when we began looking at what the individual items are. So Groton would have to bore a greater share of it than if you went through a renovate like new process.
Okay, just one more question. So possibly it's a little less than $55 million.
The 55 does compare to the 184.
Right. Yes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Since it seems like, if I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that the racial imbalance problem is mainly in the elementaries. Is that correct?
Well, there's a racial imbalance at both the middle schools and the Right now, we're only triggering a racial imbalance at the elementary. But that, as you saw that chart with the demographics, that line is shifting. Our demographic trend is shifting to the west, and so we've had to continually redistrict to try to keep those in balance. Of course, a single middle school will eliminate that altogether, and then we have to do the intra-district magneting at the elementaries to get that back in balance.
Yeah, as of now, it's only the elementary schools that are in that 15–25% threshold. What the state does is if you're 15–25%, you're in an impending where they put you on notice. If you're over 25% is where you actually have to draft a plan, go to the State Board of Ed, and it becomes very serious, and things like ECS funding are tied to that plan. So tied to implementing that plan and having a success from that plan, they use various sort of carrots and sticks to be able to keep the district moving along. So right now it's Gloucester. And what happened last year was, while we were in our planning process, we had assumed that Gloucester would be eligible, and then when the official number came in, it was less than, I believe, 4 students made the difference between 80% versus 57%, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a moving target the way it's set up.
Was any consideration, we've got the 55 million, we got the 184, was it to, and a lot of the cost there is building a one middle school. Was the option of looking at renovate like new the 3 elementary schools, or 2 out of the 3? Was
Yep.
that priced and looked at?
Yeah, we did look at that. Discussions with the Board of Ed, and we had a visioning workshop with about 34 stakeholders over 2 days. Their concern was, even though it's not numeric in that it's not notified by the state, they see an inequity between the 2 schools. The educators see an inequity between the 2 schools, and there are concerns about putting everybody on a level platform and being able to offer equal opportunities and equal services for the same amount of dollars. If you think about having to try to run any sort of programs, you're running 2 concurrent programs in 2 buildings. Putting that program in 1 building, you're able to have as many students as possible, for it to be as efficient as possible, and for it to have as much cost savings as possible. So they really wanted to be able to add to the education, just not maintain status quo at the current dollars that are being expended, and they saw this as the greatest opportunity to do that. One of the other huge driving factors is the co-location. When you have a co-location, you have an opportunity for staff to walk a few hundred yards over to the neighboring school, Fitch High School, to be able to access resources there. So if you have some true specialty staff and you're looking at splitting them between buildings, you truly have an opportunity to be able to do that now, which can really translate into a lot of savings. Did I hit it?
You hit it.
Thank you.
And we can also share staff. So in our middle schools, we're seeing an increase of students in the middle school years by 8th grade taking Algebra 1. And we have middle school teachers who are certified in Algebra 1, but if you're on the same campus, you could have some efficiency by having a high school Algebra 1 teacher come to the middle school and do that. We did that in New Canaan when I served there for 22 years, between New Canaan High School and Sachs Middle School. So there are some really great things and opportunities, orchestra, band, music programs, all kinds of things that can be shared.
Thank you.
Representative Casper.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I had a question on the, there was a couple things you mentioned on the middle school. One was the traffic flow. And you mentioned you wanted to keep it separate from the high school. But they're on 2 different schedules, aren't they?
Yeah, what we did was, they are on 2 different schedules, but what I said when I wanted to separate traffic flow, I wanted to separate where the buses are dropping off from where the parents are dropping off. So where you have parents rushing in the morning to try to drop their kids off before work, and a lot of times on older designs and older buildings, that all happens within a tight, compact area where you have to have a lot of teaching staff out there being traffic guards. And there was an unfortunate accident that happened a couple years ago. So what we're doing is physically designing it and leaving the space and having the budget to keep buses completely separate in a separate loop from where any parents are going to enter. So kids aren't crossing in front of buses, getting out of a parent's car, opening the door, crossing in front of a bus, or a bus pulling through in an area where you have car doors opening up. So that's what we wanted to do. And the reason we separate it, we have a separate access point on the site off of Fort Hill Road is, one of our first site analysis tasks were to look at being able to site this middle school on the existing high school site. So we went out with our team of site designers and engineers, and we identified, as shown in pink, 2 critical choke points. These are very narrow areas that you would have to egress students out of, and we think as it stands now that these are very challenging. And after talking with the high school staff, they have to have administrators out there directing traffic, because we have a really, really narrow area between St. Mary's Church and the edge of the building where all vehicles need to pass through. The buses egress through here. If we were to access the middle school site through this area, we would be putting over 2,000 students on one site running through that very tiny choke point. So that was a definite safety factor that we really wanted to avoid. And another huge issue that we identified as part of it is that there is no true secondary emergency egress on the existing high school site. So what this allows to do is to be able to have a gate. So you could put a gate up, and that gate will separate the 2 sites' vehicles physically. And if there is an emergency where you need to be able to egress the site very, very quickly because of some unknown reason, you're able to use now both egress points for both schools, essentially creating a much safer environment for both student bodies.
Yeah, that egress though on Fort Hill, that's a very steep grade. And I think that's going to be controversial to people that know that. Because especially in the winter, you know, snowstorm comes during the day and they have to release early. That's going to be...
We were concerned about that as well. We went out, took a look at it. There's actually a false plateau in this area, and our traffic engineer had a conversation with the DOT at that particular egress point, and we went out and had a site visit, and we all talked about it. And they did not have an issue depending on how the design unfolded and if there would be any off-site improvements, i.e. to the roadway that would be necessary. The DOT did not have an issue with us egressing it there at that point on Fort Hill Road.
Yeah, the problem is going to be the cars that are stopped getting started again. It's not going to be the egress. It's going to be a traffic jam right there. And the traffic, if you were exiting from both places simultaneously, you still have the choke point right there. Most of the traffic is going to come back to Route 1. And
like I said, for a site test fit, this is not the final design. This is, we thought this was a very safe and reasonable area for the traffic flow. Obviously, when you get into full design of the site, things may change and most likely will change. And that can further be refined where there may be creating additional storage on the roadway for vehicles, looking at a turn lane, looking at a way to be able to make the improvements work. Anywhere you put a school of any size, you're going to have traffic impacts. You never build anything, or you never create an institutional use, whether it's a school, a municipal building, or build any commercial residential development and say, boy, without any off-site improvements or without any studying and design, we're going to have less impact. You're adding more density. You're adding more volume. So yeah, it's something that's going to have to be looked at, but we don't see it as a significant issue. I know the perception of adding an extra egress point, people are nervous, but it's something that we've looked at, we vetted, and we feel comfortable with at this point in time.
Representative Wells, you had your hand up earlier. Do you still wish to speak?
Yes.
No, Representative Wells.
Oh.
Did you still wish to speak?
About those 3 elementary schools, was any consideration given to selling those properties and putting them back on the tax rolls? I know Mystic Real Estate tends to be in short supply, and that is Ocean View Avenue. So I think there might be, and the Cutler School is at the intersection of 2 state highways. So I'm just wondering if anybody had given any thought to those numbers. And one other just minor thing that I'm sure you folks made the rounds. Could you say, oh, they have an excellent school in Colchester, you ought to drive by and see what that. Did you see any really nice schools that we might aspire to?
We are not at the point of designing the facilities yet. That would be the next stage.
Mm-hmm.
We just tried to get a rough thing. We'll put a school here. Like that's really where the level we were at of schools around.
But anyway, we just went through the William Seeley School,
Yeah.
and it was, I guess, somewhere between a toxic waste site and
Right.
and,
Right.
desirable.
Yeah,
real
I'll actually touch on your last question first and get to your first question last. It's quite interesting when you look at what's happening in southeastern Connecticut, and either it's everybody's seeing what's happening at EB, or there's other various factors. But you look at Stonington; they are doing 2 renovations, major renovations, about $60-some odd million to 2 elementary schools right now. Ledyard is in the process of doing a master plan, and actually they've passed referendum as well, just like Stonington, for some significant school construction there as well. North Stonington is doing construction at all of their buildings right now. New London, well, we know what's going on there, and there are several others on down the line looking at this. So in the state of declining enrollment, schools are looking at being able to position themselves for efficient operation, be able to save some dollars, and right now where rates are still low, to be able to bond those dollars and move forward with the construction. To touch on the future use of those town assets that are being decommissioned, that was not in the purview of this committee, but what we've talked about, we can't help ourselves in the 2.5 years or 3 years that we've been working on it, discussing this on a monthly basis, to be honest with you. But ultimately, it's their town assets, and you would form a committee very similar to how we formed a committee, and you would take a look at it and say, boy, what is a great future use of this? Does the town keep it? Does Claude Chester become athletic fields? Does Pleasant Valley go to a commercial use? And what exactly is going to happen? You have a group of stakeholders like we have here that's been hopefully less than 2.5 years to be able to make a recommendation and ultimately make the right decision about those buildings.
Representative Parker, you had your hand up next.
Hi, I'm Craig Kohler. I sat on the task force. I also sat on the original Phase 2. And in answer to your question on did we tour schools, we have been on tours of certain schools. One of the schools that I remember distinctly is the Glastonbury Middle School and the way that it was configured. So it was about the same size as what we would be looking at here, which has a school within a school concept. In their design, it was 3 different wings for your 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, because I know that's a concern with some parents on, oh, the size of the school, how do we do this? You can also do it floor by floor so that the kids are still within their own age group. So we did look at certain schools. And whenever somebody asks me about the size of the school, I'll always go down to this. Ask your kid where they spend most of their time in a school. It's in the classroom. It's the size of the classroom. It's very rare that they're all together in any one event. So it's really the size of the classrooms that matter. But we did tour some schools to take a look at certain facilities.
Representative McDermott.
Parker.
Thank you, Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My question, could you go back to the West Side Elementary part?
And just to let, excuse me, just 1 second, just to let everybody know, this presentation is going to be forwarded tomorrow, and we'll send it out to the body, so you guys will all get this.
And by the way, all of our detailed handouts over the last 3.5 years are up on the town's website. You can check them all out, all the detailed demographic analysis, the specifics of the survey that we've done. It's all up there. You can spend hours and hours and hours going over it, like we have.
There's several workshops, too, that also go on TV,
Yeah.
and the videos are up on the website as well.
Yeah.
Be able to go and view that information there.
Sorry, thanks.
Representative Parker.
My question is, you have a turn coming out of here. You guys know that's Pfizer's coming out. You guys are taking into account the traffic flow. That's a lot. You'll have to have so many people stationed there, and then with the homes and stuff, people coming, trying to cross the streets. There's only one crosswalk. I'm seeing an entrance in where the buses normally go.
Yeah, this will be returned to the bus loop.
Correct, and that's what it is now.
Rather than having pavement where you could flow through to where is parking right now for staff and parents.
Right.
It will be completely separated with full sidewalks where students are going to walk on sidewalks. We see as well, which aren't showing, a continuation of the sidewalks to ensure you have a complete sidewalk system.
My concern is that there.
And this new access point would be controlled. It would have an administrative control at it, and this would have staff parking as well as parent drop-off, to have parent drop-off over here.
But you know, there's a safety person that stands there now. So you have to almost have 2 different people standing there, so which is another cost. Because you're going to have people coming from Pfizer or coming to EB going the back roads. That's their route.
I understand that.
But it's an elementary school, and they typically start at 9 and are done by
8:50 start time. 8:50.
Unless there's after-school programs that stay late if they have the after-school program.
Yeah, if there's after-school programs, the parents, if they're going to pick their students up, are required to park in the parking lot and go in the building and sign out their children. The children aren't going to be running across the street. Everything will be controlled on the site. There's not going to be any drop-off on the roadway.
But that's a turn in, correct? Is that a turn in and come out?
This is a turn in and a turn out here. I understand it's different than it is right now, but in order to meet modern safety standards, you need to separate this from this. You have to do that for on-site safety.
And you guys have discussed this route with the state, I mean DOT, with the way it's coming out of the buildings?
That would have to go through an entire OSTA process as part of design. The state mandates that process where they're going to review it. The state will not review that until it becomes an application becomes an application in front of them. That's how the state operates.
But right now, there's a single, we're adding an access point.
We're adding an access point, and
We're not subtracting it.
My concern is the access point going in.
yeah, if I may,
Yeah.
the existing traffic volumes on this roadway, I know, if you live locally and everybody in their
I do.
local
That's-
neighborhood has a perception of what volumes are and when volumes are too much. But being able to, the existing volumes on this roadway and when the student drop-off would be occurring and the number of students, because don't forget, this is going to largely be a walking school. There's going to be a lot of students in this neighborhood getting students in and out of the school walking. It is not the significant issue that many that live in the neighborhood may think it is, to be honest with you. But it would have to go through the whole design process, look at safety, and honestly, this is a test fit. If it has to be moved, it could be relocated.
Yeah.
We just looked at it as a very logical point without spending, years in design and working back and forth with the state. This is a test fit. It may be moved, it may not be moved. We would have to go through that process of negotiating and working back and forth with the state, really looking at if there are any sightline concerns or any safety concerns. This is not a final design of where it's going to be, and I don't want people to think that is. This is just to show that it works. The site designers may have put it here, it could have been here, looking at the volumes of it, but it sounds to me like your concern is putting anything on the roadway that's outside of where the existing is.
It's just, my concern is that the traffic person's there now, and then you have another access point. And then you got to remember, a lot of the schools where they live, they don't have sidewalks, so some of the kids will be bused from down the road.
I understand that.
So,
If everybody comes out this point right now, everybody,
correct.
everybody, and right now what we're saying is only buses will come in and out of here. That's it. The main access for this site is going to be right here. So instead of egressing here with the vehicular volumes, they're going to be egressing here. But the point may actually be somewhere else in here. It was just based on the site conditions, that's where it landed for a test fit. It's not the final design.
Representative Gilly.
One thing which I'm just wondering is, we've looked, you've come up with figures for the building of a new middle school, figures for remodeling the two existing middle schools into elementary schools. Do we know how much it is going to cost us to appropriately repair and do any renovations for the remaining elementary schools? Charles Barnum, Mary Morrison.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
they will need work done on them, and it's not going to be minor.
That's on there. Back that up.
Is it on there?
Yeah.
I was not sure.
It's just not highlighted, and we didn't pull that out into the 55 million, but on that same slide, you see the backlog for those other schools.
Okay, but because ultimately it will have to be done, and that's another, almost 15 million?
Yes, ma'am. We
Okay.
still need CIPs to come through this body to keep our schools updated.
Right.
Yes,
No,
ma'am.
I'm just, when we're looking at this, I know this is one of the things which drove me nuts about the previous
Right.
phase two, is they
Right.
had all this, and then nobody ever, it was sort of like, oh yeah, and just magically we'll somehow or other repair the other schools, and it's like,
The
when
CIPs
we're
come up
looking at
year
all
over
the
year, right?
figures.
The CIPs come up.
Yeah.
I mean,
But-
it's like a house or a car where you need,
Oh, yeah.
you need to keep
And this has
investing.
been, I know, one of
Can-
our
can we please let
problems is that we
Representative Gilly
keep
finish?
kicking it down the road, which is why I'd kind of like to see everything at once so people know what we are voting for, what we're going to end up, what we will have to pass to keep things going. Whether we do this or the other one, we are going to have to spend the money on those 4 schools. And I'd like to see that, stressed, that, we can't just, oh, we've done all this great stuff, they'll get done eventually. And then they'll fall down and we'll be back to bonding for whole new buildings. I'd like to see the repairs more brought up a little bit better.
Yes, ma'am. I think that's clearly beyond the scope of our charter.
Yeah.
But it's, to me, unless I'm wrong about the way this town is made up, it's clearly within the bounds of your charter to address those kinds of needs.
Well, as
but
long
I
as
think
we
that's
get
great.
the CIPs too.
Yes, ma'am. I think that's awesome.
Okay.
2012 numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
So it will be, yes. So.
And actually, some of those Sam has been, Sam Patrick's facility director has been nipping at over the years on whether it's some of the abatement dollars that are, moving through for asbestos. So, those are things that are being tackled one at a time just because you have to do it to keep the kids in the building. Yeah.
Because I think the other thing which had me concerned is, we're talking about, the building is X old, we can't use it anymore, it's not designed. I went to an elementary school which is older than Fitch Middle. It is still in use. It is one of the highest rated schools in its town, which is a university town. So the age of the building does not, the design of the building does not automatically mean that we have to throw it out, which is often how our plans sound like, it's 40 years old, it's 50, it's too old.
Yeah.
So.
And just to add to that, the age of the building means nothing if you've continually done the proper investments, you've conditioned the building, you've made investments, not just maintenance, but you've invested back into it. Whether it's roof systems, windows, upgrading asbestos, wiring, electrical systems so you can handle technology.
ADA requirements, special needs, occupational therapy, nursing things, breakout spaces. I totally agree. But
and buildings that are 80, 60
expensive.
years old that have had that done, they don't build them like they're going to keep on living, and they've reconfigured spaces, they've opened spaces to make them modern, but they've still used that same shell of the building. Ultimately, if this plan were to go through, you're looking at Cutler and Westside would be those older buildings that have had the love, they've had the reinvestment that have needed, and then you have a 60-year-old building that has another life ahead of it. But when you look at the buildings, Catherine Kolnaski and Northeast are going to be 10 years old next year.
Plus the changes in our requirements, and Sam could correct us, between the 20s and 60 years later to the 80s, or 40 years later from the 20s to the 60s, those changes in both environmental compliance and ADA and special needs, those are dwarfed by the relative changes that we've seen over the last 40 years. Look at the two, Sam always points to those two brand new buildings, Kolnaski and Northeast Academy. And you see we have a backlog on there. At Kolnaski, it's 17?
Yeah, it's
$137,000. Almost a brand new building. Guess what that is? Guess what that new requirement is?
And just
it's safety and security post Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook. So like the requirements are changing rapidly. When I went to a school that was built in the 19-teens, and it served me well back in the 1970s. But that's because the educational requirements and the building specs did not change like they are now.
And there's portable classrooms at the elementary schools that portable classrooms by the state definition are temporary spaces.
Oh, yes, and my daughter was in one of them at Charles Barnum, and I think that's it. We're doing all this here, but Charles Barnum has portables.
They're coming offline as part of this.
Thank God.
All
At
portable,
Morrison had portables.
All portables will be coming offline. Those ones at Charles Barnum, Mary Morrison, I believe they are 30-some years old. They've been re-roofing, working on putting money into temporary classrooms where students have to go outside the building, go into the classroom. Classrooms that in the state's eyes and everybody else's eyes are used for only an emergency purpose, for either swing space for construction, a temporary bubble in population, some unforeseen event, have been used as regular brick and mortar space for 30 years.
Oh, as I said, my children went to Mary Morrison. They were redistricted to Charles Barnum. I know, that's why I'm kind of concerned, because they are fantastic schools.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of them in all of this excitement of new construction.
No, it will not be. In fact, the eye is to be able to take the portables offline there, right-size the population there, so then you can have classroom space to add educational opportunities so that you're not cramming students into spaces that really aren't the best spaces in the building.
But Barnum, Morrison, those aren't in our charter. Those are beyond the scope of what we had to deal with. Thanks, Representative.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very
yes,
much.
Yes, ma'am.
Because when you look at the whole system.
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Representative McDermott.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John, we thank you for your and the committee's great efforts here.
Thank you.
The goals are certainly laudable. There are a lot of moving parts to this thing, and including the town council can pull the whole thing if everything doesn't go well. I'm not entirely comfortable with that. But the big deal is the cost and the reimbursement.
Yes, sir.
And it comes down to either it's $100 million. Is that the 46.5 reimbursement rate? Is that what that is predicated upon for the major project?
Yes,
oh, okay. And the estimate, the $55 million estimate in 2012 dollars, say it's $60 million now.
Right.
That does not include any reimbursement from the state?
That did not. So as Mr. Zupa says, Mike said that we would probably get on each of those projects, we'd probably get somewhere between 20-25% reimbursement on that 55 million, right?
25 reimbursement?
Well, of the 55 million, you would have some eligible, some ineligible. You're talking about, I believe it's 57% on renovation right now as it stands. And then some items are eligible fully, some aren't. So you would figure you would get a percentage of that. We were estimating, 20-25% of that you would be able to then capture.
Why wouldn't it be 46.5%?
Not everything is 100% eligible that you're doing in the school building, to be honest with you.
So you figure 25%?
And you don't know until you actually get into the schematic design and see how it lines up with the various, how do I put it, the state's formula on how they're going to reimburse you. The state is enforcing rules on reimbursement that they've never enforced before due to the climate there right now.
So we would be talking about $45 million then, essentially, instead of 60, let's say?
Well, the 60 is the total cost, just
No,
to
I understand that.
address some issues. And then
If we got 25% reimbursement.
Let's just say even you got 50% reimbursement overall. You're still looking at $30 million to the town to basically only address those most pressing code. I mean, you have school classrooms that don't have emergency egress windows, things like that. It is not improving the environment. It is not improving the educational opportunities, and it's not consolidating the buildings to be more efficient. You're just putting the money back into them.
But it's not 55 or 60 million. It's a little less than that then.
To the taxpayers, to the Groton taxpayers.
No one would ever be able to give you an exact number of that $55 million of what would be eligible unless you're actually in the project, doing the design and submitting the paperwork as you go and closing it out day by day with the state to say what it would exactly be to the taxpayer, because it is a back and forth with them. Sam, how long does it take to be able to get reimbursement? Didn't we just get it back for the portable classrooms or?
Yeah, we got 2 checks this past summer for Cutler Middle School and Ridge High School.
Which were done in?
Well, the Cutler Middle School done a year and a half.
And then there's also the problem of where do you put the students while you are doing all of these projects, even with an asbestos project that needs to get done. We're doing some of that in the summertime, but if you're doing something significant, then you might go into the school year and then you have to consider what happens to all those students while you are fixing up.
Yeah, and I'm going to steal what Representative Scott said at, I believe, a Cal meeting a couple months back when we had about a half-hour debate on the $184 million number and what it entails for the plan. And he kind of went back and played a little bit of a historian role in what he said, and it was going back to the master plan of 2000 or 2001 with JCJ, where they had identified the need for a middle school and the need for the elementary schools, basically the same major components that are identified in this plan. Then going back to phase 2 had identified separate consultants, separate committee, and all these situations, the same major construction components that are the pressing issues that need to be addressed. So we've had 3 separate processes here now in the town of Groton, identifying the same top pressing issues that need to be addressed, and they all came up with the same conclusion. The only thing that substantively changed was the mode of delivery based on the educators, their vision, as well as the construction cost, because construction costs keep going up and reimbursement keeps going down. So you're looking at a 15-year span that identified the same pressing issues as well as the same remedies for them.
Well, I'm looking at this from a voter point of view. That's what I'm doing. I suspect the RTM is going to echo what the town council did. I can't imagine we wouldn't do that and send it to referendum. So when people get into the voting booth, they're going to look at a number of $84 million or something less than 55 million. That's what they're going to be weighing. So that's why I'm questioning the actual numbers for the renovation. Thank you.
That's a great question.
Representative Conley.
I have a few questions, all for different people. So I'll start with the superintendent of schools, or assistant superintendent of schools. What would be the educational benefit to the elementary school students by relocating to the rehabbed elementary schools?
Educational benefits for the elementary by being in the modern elementary schools, the modernization.
Well, one of the things we do know is that we are losing many, many students to New London schools, which are brand new and have so much to offer, and that the educational value of having a new facility, especially with our initiative with using technology and just even the design of the building and the way that we're doing kind of a workshop model. We've had Columbia University Teachers College coming coaching our teachers in writing workshop and now reading workshop. So the facilities really does, promote that kind of learning. And especially if you do a design that would be a specialized magnet school, then you could build, let's say, if it's a science program or based on science, you would have a science lab. So you could actually model that building or tailor that building so that it fits what the magnet would be.
My next question, I'm not sure who it should be addressed to, so whoever knows the answer, feel free. There is an open space issue on the site of the new middle school. Has the open space that would be switched or transferred, has that site been identified?
Here you go.
Thanks. We're in active discussions with DEEP right now. We have been for a while. In fact, I think Mike and I first went up there October of 14 with a list of potential sites, and John Reiner and his staff have identified sites. We sent a letter to DEEP probably around a month ago with a specific parcel. We had done an appraisal of the Merritt property and a couple other properties, and sent the preferred site to them for discussion. This is a piece of property that we already own or will be owning through foreclosure. It's in the process, and we're waiting to hear back from them. I mean, that is a precondition. I mean, if we don't get approval by the time we want to stick a shovel in the ground, we can't move forward with the project, because it's the Merritt piece that has been identified as the preferred piece. We would like to hope that we will know or have a sign-off from DEEP by the time this goes to the voters, but in reality, that may not happen. So there's going to have to be somewhat of a leap of faith, but also an understanding is we don't have a project unless we can find an alternative piece. I just want to note, because you've asked the question, and a lot, we acquired the Merritt piece in the late 80s, very early 90s. We got some state funding, commonly referred to as open space funding, but the program was different there, despite some of the local opposition when we wanted to use the Merritt property for temporary parking to support the high school project. The state is a little concerned that we've never developed the property for recreational facilities. So the pieces of property that we are offering or that we've identified, they want to know that if we choose to, they can be developed for recreational purposes. The open space program is different now, but to convert it, it appears that they want to apply the rules that were in place almost 20 years ago.
And are you able to share those pieces of properties that you submitted to DEP?
I'm not sure that would be a good idea, because some of them are privately owned at this point. And since the foreclosure hasn't been finalized on the other one, let me check with the town attorney. I'd be glad to report back at the next RTM meeting.
Okay, fair. Because I know some people who are concerned about the open space. That is a #1 concern for some folks, and they're not yet giving the project a chance. And if this goes to referendum, you would hope that they can get past that to to think about the project. My next question, I have two money questions. The first is with the 184, the total number, is there a section of that that's built in for overages? Because I know we talked about some traffic concerns. I'm sure other folks have other concerns. The unfortunate facts of life, things do always cost more than we thought they would when you build.
Yeah, as with any construction project, especially when you're looking out a number of years actually doing it, within the soft cost, there are many contingencies as well as, legal fees, traffic impact, anything else that could be unforeseen are all packaged up into that number, as well as, and it hasn't been asked, but I will address it, doing some look at the vintage of the building without actually going in and sampling everything for environmental, getting a good feel based on the vintage of the building of what potential environmental concerns could be there so that there's enough dollars to be able to remediate in a proper manner as well.
Final question. Folks have been asking me, and I know numbers were given in the day as to what the project would mean to the taxpayers in a low year versus a high year of the repayment of the bond. I'd like the group or whoever can for August meeting to get those numbers. I'll give whoever's the facts and figures person the opportunity to give us the numbers if the day did not have the correct numbers. And I'd also ask if those numbers could be given on a straight reimbursement if for some reason the 80% didn't come through, that we at least have all the numbers available.
Okay, the latter part of your question, we haven't developed those numbers, but there is fiscal impact analysis that we did do and provide the council. We can certainly get that to all the RTM members, and we'll try to come up with a number if we don't get the 80%. I mean, my sense is if we don't get the 80% or something close to that, we probably don't have the project. So
well,
that's why
we'd leave that in the arms of the council, because I believe that would be their purview and
that's
not ours.
correct. Yep.
So I'd like to have the full numbers so we can be all aware. Thank you.
Representative Frickman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Actually, I just want to add to that. Is it possible that those numbers are the numbers that there were per 100,000 instead of the average over? Because I think one number out there was a $250 average per year. Is it possible we get the numbers that are per 100,000 per each year of the project?
We've debated this almost from the beginning of time. I, being for an advocate, I'm that we do it per 100,000 because, and that's what we did for the council. So the numbers that you'll see from the memo that we did for the council is per, as opposed to the average value of a home, which, you know, most people, that means there's one house out there that has that value and everybody else is a little bit different. And I think most people can figure it out from the 100,000. So yes, we have that, and we will come up with a number to address Chris's point also by 100,000.
No.
Mrs. Dauphin, did you want to say something?
Jane Dauphin, I've been on the task force for a couple of years, and I wanted to just say something about the 55 million.
I don't think your mic's on, Jane.
Just closer to your.
Okay. Jane Dauphin, I've been on the task force for a couple of years, and I wanted to say something to clarify the 55 million. I don't think it's too low. I think it's, I don't think it's too high. I think it's too low. The number is 4 or 5 years old. It represents only fixing code issues in these schools. So don't let any voter, and don't think yourself that spending $55 million on these schools is an alternative in what the final result is to doing this project. The 3 schools that we would like to take offline are outdated educationally. They are contaminated, and they're money pits. We could spend $55 million on them and we'd still have libraries that were built for just books. We would have ceiling height that is so low that you can't address the air quality in there. And they're too small. We've had 9 portables at these 3 schools for 30 years. 30 years. So are we going to put $55 million, which is an old number, into these schools and then buy new portables? I mean, to my mind, it's the worst public investment we as a town could make, is to spend money on these 3 old schools. They're not efficiently sized, and they don't offer a good education anymore. One of the reasons I'm so excited about this project is because we've come up with a plan that makes sense educationally. It addresses efficiency problems that we have going forward. We save money, and it addresses the inequities in town, which in any given year may not be racial, but we know in every single year they're socioeconomic. And those educational opportunities are not the same. They're not equal. I think we all know that. So the $55 million is not apples and apples. I just wanted to make that point.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, gentlemen, and Susan, for your presentation. I just want to ask for a little bit more clarification on 3 things that I heard, and the plan is the last one. The first one was a statement made that air quality is a definite concern. As a parent that had a student go through 12 years here, I'm concerned with a statement like that, particularly for parents that have students there now. So can I get a little bit more information on what the definite concern is when it comes to air quality, and how potentially dangerous is that?
You have buildings that are not only not conditioned, but the more important thing of having an operating HVAC is that it's moving air, it's filtering air. Many of the buildings can't even support wall unit air conditioners because the electrical system isn't there. If we were to go ahead and put publicly major environmental concerns and go and test major environmental concerns, the town would immediately have to act on those. So as part of the process, and we debated for I don't know how many meetings, environmental concerns in the building and major safety concerns, and drawing those out publicly and posting them up for everybody to see, and exactly what happens when that's done. So I'm not going to get into the exact specifics of it, but we toured the buildings as a complete task force. And several of those buildings, when we all walked into it, the committee members immediately recognized many of those smells as smells that should not be in a school building. And those smells are due to leaky roofs, water, inadequate ventilation, and they're handled on and sort of as needed basis as issues arise, just to mitigate that immediate issue, not being proactive to address the cause. One of the other things, it's not environmental quality, but it really is a major concern, is when you go into a school like SB Butler and realize the cafeteria is in the lower level, and if you have a child that is has a disability where they are challenged mobily, whether it's wheelchair, crutches, or just can't move very well, they physically have to take a lift to get down there to be able to have lunch with their classmates. And we talk about modernization and what is a current standard for that. You would never design a building with that kind of situation and condition. So these are all things that went into the decision-making process on determining what is a keeper building, what is not a keeper building, and what buildings do you want to invest in, Charles Barnum, and what buildings are just past their useful life. So hopefully I addressed it to your satisfaction without putting too much out there.
The reason I bring that up first is because being on TV, as we are, and the parents in the town can easily watch, and you actually go back and rewatch if they would like. A statement like that earlier this evening draws initial concern, and it still kind of does, but I'll leave it with that. The other statement was the state sees inequities in the middle schools, and I think that has to do with educational inequities. Was that the reasoning behind that statement? And that was with a map with the all the basic student dots all over the place. So the 2 middle schools are inequitable.
The 2 middle schools, from the state standpoint right now, and I believe maybe John had misspoke, the state right now the middle schools do not have any issues racial balance. They're below that 15% threshold for the derivation from the district-wide average, so that is not a concern. But the district from their teaching experience and what they see in the individual buildings, obviously for them to give us a charge, the board did, to be able to have a consolidated middle for equal and equitable opportunity, they see it. They see it educationally.
So I was just going back to the statement that the state sees inequities in the middle schools. Might have been a little bit broader of a statement.
No, if I said the state sees it, I
That
did.
wasn't. It was Mike.
Oh, well, there you go.
No, I meant the state sees inequities in the elementary schools, and that's what's being notified, to be honest with you.
And we have that in writing. Because I know that right now, as of this last budget season, we are back within racial balance, barely.
Yeah, there is a plan on record filed in 2013 with the State Department of Education that Ms. Austin spoke to earlier, that to a T is the plan that we're presenting here. And that is the plan to address long-term racial balance. The State Board of Ed stamped that plan and approved that plan. And if that plan does not move forward, as they told us, if this fails at referendum, tear that plan up and come back with a new plan and tell us how you're going to do it. And we don't want to see this imbalance happen again.
Thank you, because that actually goes into my last question, which was really Susan that said it initially, but that's okay, you just said it again. The state was given this plan, the 2020 plan, as what we're planning on moving forward with the expectation that we hope that it gets through referendum. And if it doesn't, a new plan has to come forward. Okay, thank you.
New task force with a new chairman.
Are there any additional questions? Representative Baker.
I want to thank you, gentlemen and ladies, very much for your presentation tonight. It certainly was very, very interesting, but I think when you come back in August and present this to the taxpayers are going to want to know. I mean, I'm a teacher, and it's wonderful to hear about these opportunities for students and the wonderful opportunities they'll give them, and I think it's actually great. But as taxpayers, I'm going to want to know, what is it going to cost me? What is it going to cost me in taxes? If we have a cost overrun, what is it going to cost me? Why can't I just fix up those other schools? And you have to let people know specifically what this is going to cost them. And then there's a lot of people in town that don't have children in the school system.
Right.
And they also need to be convinced that we really do need some new schools, we really need better schools. So that's all I'm saying to you. You don't have to answer any question right now.
No,
but just remember to keep that in mind.
No, thank you so much, Representative Baker. And I would just address that, saying I am not coming to this project as a parent. I'm going to say I was a parent. My kids are going to graduate. They're done. My daughter's a sophomore at Fitch. My son's a 7th grader at Cutler, and he will finish Cutler before this is done, and he'll graduate from Fitch. He's in the class of 2022, I think. I mean, he's done by the time this happens. I'm not doing these schools for my kids. I'm doing these schools for the people who have kids that are going to buy my house at 19 Packer Lane. That's who I'm building this for, is my buyers. Because, you know, I work in the military, and constantly we have new families, transient. It's a very transient community. They come in for 2-3 years, and they're saying to me, "Hey, John, where should I buy a house?" Right? And I want to say Groton, and I do say Groton. For a while, a couple of years, I was like, I'm not so sure. We're in a little bit of turmoil, but I think we have steadied the ship. To continue that analogy, we have gotten our town back, or certainly our schools have steadied the course. I feel very comfortable sending my kids, air quality aside, to the educational programming that Ms. Austin, Dr. Grenier, and their troops are putting forth. I'm very pleased with the education that both of my kids are getting. But I'm really, but you know, that they still go out and see the opportunities at New London, at Stonington, at Waterford, and all the infrastructure investment that's going on there. And a new school does not guarantee a great education, but a bad school can certainly thwart one. There's no doubt about that in my mind. We see constantly people looking at that STEM magnet school in New London and saying, oh my gosh, and those wonderful magnet elementaries they're doing at Winthrop. As Ms. Austin said, $2.6 million of our taxpayer dollars are going out of our district, either to schools of choice, and I'm a big choice fan, but we want to compete, Representative Baker. We want our schools to be in that competitive environment, and because of the state mandate, we cannot attract outsiders. That means we just have to retain the insiders. So I totally agree with you. I'm not coming at this from a standpoint of educating kids. I'm coming at it from somebody's going to buy my house, and I want to jack that grand list up on them, and the number one thing that does that is good schools.
Representative Garcia, did you have your hand up? Did you want to speak?
Okay. I only have one question, and you used the figure of 52% approval that you've gotten on this, back I think on the 55 million. My question is, who was surveyed? Parents? Who was surveyed?
400.
Yeah. Back in the summer of 2015, a separate survey firm, Center for Research and Public Policy, we worked with them to get a survey that represented the community. So what we did was we looked at each individual area in the town and had enough surveys in each different area, whether it's town, city, Noank, Mystic, and they had 410, 420 telephone survey, which gives you a statistically valid survey.
All voter eligible.
All
voters.
voter eligible. They were, if you were not an eligible voter, you were not surveyed. They were able to capture cell phones as well as landlines. It's very sophisticated how they do it. We've quoted 52%, but what we'll point out is that of that 52%, we're at plus or minus 4.96%. So is 52% a guarantee? Well, no, it's not. 52% can easily be 47%, but it could also easily be 57%. So
Are you telling me that that the survey took place with 400 and some odd people?
that is a standard for a telephone survey. And that is, and just to, and I know a telephone survey is used for many things. It's used for checking referendum, and that's one of the specialties that this survey firm brought to us, as well as being able to poll for elections and poll for major companies and market research. And that is the magic number, and the public rarely believes that number. But you know what? When you go back and look at it, that is what a statistically valid telephone survey is.
The presidential polls we're doing are about that. Now, Quinnipiac is cranking on about that sample size.
Yeah. Representative Dean Shenbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I want to thank you for your work.
Yes,
It is a thankless job. I know it is.
Not anymore. You're welcome.
I 15 years
Yeah.
at Cutler.
Thank
My
you, thank
lungs
you.
are fine, and that smell you probably smelled walking in there was the locker room because it's right near the front door. My question is, where is adult ed going to go? I know it's at West Side right now, and I know a lot of the participants walk. Where is adult ed going?
We did design,
Yeah.
we did design that. Go ahead.
As part of what was put into the educational specification, which determines what's going to be in the building, we looked at the community programs that are there now and wanted to ensure that we had adequate space and accessibility. And the great thing about being able to go through a process and be able to redesign a building is you look at you look at Kolnaski or Northeast, you're able to separate out those community spaces and secure those from where the children are daily, so you're able to use it for community use, lock out those other spaces to ensure that the community is only in this kind of space, so that would still remain in, it would still remain in West Side, but it would be done in a much better manner than it's done, or the new middle school manner than it's done today.
Rep. Garcia, just in regards to the poll number, I just Googled it for Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac does a sample of 1,000 registered voters for the entire state of Connecticut. So 1,000 out of a population of over 3 million. So 410 to the population of Groton is an even greater statistical percentage. So I think the number would stand for itself as being statistically valid as a poll.
Councilor Dela Cruz, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I am on the town council, but also was on the school initiatives task force. And here to tell you that it was 3 years of hard work with a bunch of people. It was like herding cats, I think, in the beginning. I was only on it for the last year and a half. John did a great job. I appreciate all the work you did. But what I want to explain to everyone is that the redistricting is what's making a lot of these folks leave our town currently. And I don't think that's been really brought up enough, where I think even some people that are in the RTM aren't happy because their kid's been to 4 or 5 different schools.
You were doing
Is it dying?
You just have to
Oh,
keep it close.
so we are losing. So 400 kids left this town, and they're choosing to go to New London, and that's gonna. And there's other schools they go to, but one of the overwhelming reasons, my next door neighbor had bought a house, and immediately found out that his child wasn't gonna be able to go to Gloucester, and his mom lives 5 doors down away from him. So the whole plan was to buy this house, and the kids would walk to mom and dad's, and then he'd pick them up after work. But that's not, you can't plan that way. So the way our town is now, when you come to Groton, you have no idea which school your child's going to be going to. And that's a difficult thing to do. And I think that's why we're losing a lot of the children that we are. So it isn't just the bright, shiny school that kids are leaving. It's this whole idea that you may not know what school your kids are going to be ending up at. And I know it's been a big issue. So I think we have to take that into consideration. And again, I think when we first met, not everybody wanted new schools. Not everybody wanted to do the schools, but we kind of got funneled down into this same. We came together at the end because we went through all these processes and we realized what had to happen. So I'm hoping that not only the town council can get on, not just vote to send it out, or the RTM just doesn't vote to send it out to the public. I hope we get educated enough where we can actually get behind it and go to the supermarket and tell other folks that this is a good plan. Because it really is, and if you get educated enough on it, like I have, and like the chairman has helped us, you can see that we have to have it, and hopefully that's the only way we're gonna get it passed is by, because people trust us, because we go to all these meetings and we learn enough about it, and that's where I feel like I'm in a better position now because of all the meetings we went to. So thank you for everything you did, and it's probably the best group I've ever been a part of, and thank everybody else. Thank Jane for saying everything she said. It was great. So thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, good, because I have a few. I know that our student population has been on a downward trend, but at some point, the economy, I anticipate, I hope, will turn around. I know Electric Boat's going to be expanding in a few years. What kind of growth capacity do we have for this large middle school and for these 600 kid elementary schools, if our school population does start to go up?
As part of submitting the grant application, the state wants to take that into consideration as well. So what we do is we prepare 8-year projections, looking at the enrollment at each of at the total district as well as each of the schools, in order to ensure that you plan around that highest number. So what we were able to do was plan around that highest number, but also put in the educational specifications that the building must be designed with flexibility. The building must be designed and situated on a site where banks of classrooms can be added 15, 20 years down the road to ensure that if growth does occur, there is space for it. But there's no guarantee that growth is going to occur, that you're going to get back to the enrollment levels that you had experienced in the heyday of Groton. Birth rates are down nationally. Connecticut enrollment is down tremendously compared to the rest of the country. Everybody is dealing with the declining enrollment and saying, well, the what if? Well, the what if is to not overbuild, because you're going to be penalized for that from a dollar standpoint, but it's to be smart in how you plan and how you design to ensure that you can add space, brick and mortar space, if need be, not portable space, at a reasonable cost to each of these schools.
Okay, so the bottom line is you're going to plan in space that if we have to, they can add capacity.
Yeah, the 600 could actually support 660 or so. The 940 can actually support just over 1,000 or so when you look at what can be economized for space. However, you don't want to do that initially because you would back yourself into a corner. But when we've run different numbers and looked at the number of schools that could be consolidated, let me just say that 3 is the conservative number. And depending if the enrollment projections hold true, when you're about to populate that elementary school or both of those new elementary schools, there may be a discussion in town about, well, whether or not if enrollment declines according to the projections, that can we consolidate 3 or can we consolidate 4 schools?
And so just so I understand, Cutler and West Side will be completely demolished, and when you know?
No, they would
I thought you said
be,
you were-
they would essentially be shelled with a renovate like new.
Okay.
The existing structure of the building, all systems, roofing, sheathing, all aspects of the school, but the shell would be a complete renovate like new to LEED standards with a guaranteed 20-year life on the building. It's not new construction, but it's like new.
When you're talking about the council being able to pull the plug, I think was the word you used, what does that mean? Under what circumstances would the town council decide to pull the plug?
I mean, at this point, while the plans are conceptual, the costs are estimates, at some point you have to draw a line in the sand, and you have to put a dollar value on it and try to get approval from the voters. But behind all that are a whole bunch of assumptions. Assumptions dealing with interest rates, timing, and things like that. So, and as I noted a little while ago, there are some in my mind, some preconditions. And so, you know, if we are not successful in swapping the Merritt property for another piece, in my mind, we don't have a project. And if if we find out that the reimbursement rate changes significantly, I would suspect we probably, in a negative way, I would suspect we don't have a project. If there's some type of calamity that happens in town, God forbid, a school burns to the ground and you need to do something, the high school gets damaged somehow. There are things that the council has the ability, I don't know that they would, you would really need to address that to them, but they have the ability to stop the project or not proceed with the project, not stop it once it starts, but decide, you know, the voters approve it, something happens next spring, even if we get everything approved up at the legislature, the diversity grant comes down, but the interest rates double. We are at still at a very historical low. And interest rates have a very direct impact on that cost per $100,000. And so I think, I hope that doesn't happen, but there are a lot of assumptions. You'll see that when we distribute the fiscal analysis that was done. And there will be changes, there's no doubt. Every project is a little different. We don't have a contractor on board. They may have a different way of phasing the project or laying the project out than our consultant has. So that's what I meant by that comment, if I'm the one that said it at the time.
No, these guys said it, but yeah. No, I understand there's some, you know, we have to go through the usual wickets with the state and getting permits, and there's all kinds of hoops to jump through. But beyond that, you know, what other things would cause the town council to stop the project? So I think I understand what you're saying. Are we, just one second, Representative Bailey, are other towns in Connecticut consolidating their middle schools as well?
Yeah, it's right now with the declining enrollment across the board, whether it's middle schools or elementary schools or moving some grade levels up or down, they're looking at ways to be able to save dollars, save on staffing, still deliver the same programs or better. Is everybody doing a middle school? Well, no, not everybody's doing a middle school. This is one of the needs here. But there is a lot of activity going on with school consolidation. But everybody's right-sizing a plan that fits their community needs, their educational needs, and where they're at from a demographic and financial standpoint.
But if your question is really asking about the size of this one big middle school, we've seen we did do a study throughout Connecticut and found that
we've pulled everybody in Dirk G as well as the
right.
And if we're not talking about consolidating, if we're saying consolidating is hence the size of a school, I mean,
right.
Is a 900 student middle school the
Exactly.
largest in the state? No, it is not. I mean, there are many, it is probably the midpoint when you begin looking at it, even with, yeah, I mean, a very successful one, Saks Middle School in New Canaan is 1,500 students. There are schools that are various configurations. We looked at that as well, whether it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 8, the size of those. And ultimately, Craig said it best, and I'm going to steal his words. It's not the size of the building, number of kids in the building, it's the number of kids in the classroom. It's how you design, how you separate, and how you program the building.
But I just wanted to point that out again, because in 2013, I would say one middle, two middles was the #1 big stumbling point that our team had to get alignment on, and that 900 student enrollment just seemed like a big number to get over. So.
Yeah, we had pulled research that was put together by Craig and Hartford for other projects that they had done in the DERG as well, and looked at analogous communities, looked at what others were doing, and honestly probably spent 5 plus, maybe 6 months debating this proper size of the building with the stakeholders, and ultimately coming to this configuration. There was a lot of discussion and effort into it, coming up with this being a good model.
Well, I want to thank you for your time. Sir, you did a very good job. I know there's other questions. Mr. Representative Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This question is for the town manager, and it's in line with the moderator's last question. Is there sort of like currently in place a type of a plan of like tactical tripwires or something like that? You know, if to prevent a cost overrun, that would be charting uncharted water?
I couldn't say that there's a plan in place right now. I think, you know, there's a lot of value engineering. Once we have an approved project, once we have hired a GM or a CM, once we hire a builder, there's always a lot of value engineering that goes in. While the numbers that have been presented have been estimated out to a midpoint a couple years out, there are, you know, when we built the last schools, you know, we were dealing with inflation at 8 and 9% a year for the construction trades, not in general terms. We are seeing an uptick in inflation. So there will be adjustments that need to be made. You know, we built 3 projects before. We did have an issue with the windows in one of the schools, but the architect ultimately reimbursed the town. Cumulatively, they came in on budget. So I think we were lucky to some degree, because a lot of schools get built, a lot of big buildings get built. But no, I can't say that there's any, at this point. I think it's too early in the process. We're still building. We would need to build a team before I think we could set some of those things in place. But value engineering, I'm sure will. We had the value engineer the last project almost right out of the box, and we're regretting collectively that we had to do that. Northeast Academy is smaller than what was originally envisioned. It's a couple of classrooms smaller. A gym up there had to be made smaller because of the escalation in cost when the bids finally came in. And I'm hopefully that doesn't happen this time around. But once again, we have a tendency, I know I have a tendency, is, oh, we're going to have a shovel in the ground next year. No, we're not going to have a, we're projecting out, as was said, this is in 2021, these schools will be done. The new schools we all think of have been around for almost 10 years now. I mean, time just seems to be flying. But good point. I mean, the team is aware of that. There's no doubt that, you know, those things will have to get in place once we have the entire team on board.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Thank you, Moderator.
Are there any other questions? I'd like to thank the task force for their time. What I'd like to do is take a 5-minute break, let these guys exit this, and then we have maybe 15 more minutes of RTM work to do. So let these guys clear out. If I could ask you all to do that kind of expeditiously. We're recessed for 5 minutes. All right. We'll continue on. Are there any liaison reports? Hearing none, we move on to committee reports. Finance Committee. I don't believe there's a meeting or a report. Community Development, Chairman Conley. Education, Chairman Nugent. No meeting, no report. Recreation, Chairman Wilson.
No meeting, no report.
Public Safety, Chairman McDermott.
No meeting, no report.
Public Works, Chairman Dean Shinbrot. Rules and procedures, we already discussed earlier. Are there any budget discussions that anybody would like to bring up at this time? Any other business? Motion's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.